What if everything you were taught about weakness was wrong? What if pain wasn't your enemy, but your greatest teacher? What if every hardship you faced was not a curse, but a calling? And what if the ultimate measure of your life isn't how much comfort you've known, but how much strength you forged? This isn't just motivational fluff. It's the raw, unapologetic worldview of one of the most radical thinkers in history, Friedrich Nietzsche, the man who declared God is dead, the philosopher who told us, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how," and the voice who dared us to become who we are. Today we dive into Nietzsche's core idea, the power of the will. Not willpower in the ordinary sense, but something far more primal, far more profound. What he called der Wille zur Macht, the will to power. Let's begin. Friedrich Nietzsche was born in 1844 in a small village in Germany, the son of a Lutheran pastor. He was raised in a deeply religious household, yet he would go on to dismantle the very foundations of religious belief. A brilliant student, he became a professor at the University of Basel at only 24 years old, the youngest ever in his field of philology. But Nietzsche's life was not marked by ease. He suffered from intense migraines, digestive issues, poor eyesight, and long periods of isolation. Eventually, he would descend into madness and live the last decade of his life under care, unable to speak or write. But before that collapse, Nietzsche's pen set the world ablaze. He wrote like a prophet in exile, challenging every dogma of Western thought: Christianity, morality, truth, democracy, even science. To Nietzsche, modern society was increasingly hollow, guided by fear, comfort, and the desire to fit in. He wanted something else. He wanted the individual to wake up, break the chains, and forge their own destiny. He wasn't interested in telling people what to think. He wanted them to learn how to think for themselves. He saw himself not as a teacher, but as dynamite. The will to power, der Wille zur Macht, is Nietzsche's most central and misunderstood concept. It is not merely about political control or domination over others, as some misinterpret it. Rather, it is the fundamental life force, the basic drive within all living beings to grow, to expand, to overcome obstacles, to assert their existence. It is the energy behind evolution, creativity, struggle, ambition, and transformation. Picture a plant sprouting from a crack in the pavement, pushing through cement toward the sun. That's the will to power. Think of the child learning to speak despite repeated failures and frustrations. That's the will to power. For Nietzsche, life is will, not survival for its own sake, but a creative force yearning to express itself more fully. This drive exists in every person, but society, morality, and fear often suppress it. True growth, Nietzsche believed, comes when we stop repressing this force and start channeling it, when we become the architects of our own becoming. Nietzsche's will to power is also a direct critique of Darwin's survival of the fittest. For Nietzsche, survival alone is a low bar. The highest form of life is not the one that merely survives. It's the one that creates, that overcomes itself, that elevates existence. He was not interested in adaptation to one's environment. He was interested in the transformation of the self in the face of adversity. In this light, the will to power is not a selfish grab for control. It's a courageous expression of life that says, "I will become more than I was yesterday." To Nietzsche, the highest expression of the will to power was a being he called the Übermensch, the overman or the beyond man. This figure is not a dictator, nor a cold-hearted egoist. The Übermensch is someone who has transcended conventional morality, who has rejected herd thinking, and who creates his own values in a world where traditional meanings have collapsed. The Übermensch is a spiritual warrior, someone who lives with intensity, purpose, and authenticity. He does not cling to a divine command or societal approval. Instead, he says, "I will write my own code. I will choose what is good and evil for me." The Übermensch sees life not as something to be endured, but something to be affirmed, even with all its chaos and suffering. He embraces the dark, the difficult, the uncomfortable, not with bitterness, but with creative joy. In a world of copies, the Übermensch is an original. And here's the most radical thing Nietzsche says. This is not a myth. This is a challenge. He believed that every human being has the potential to move toward this ideal, to grow beyond inherited scripts and shape their own destiny. The Übermensch is not a goal for mankind. It's a mirror for the courageous few. It's the part of you that refuses to settle, that chooses meaning over comfort, and that knows real freedom begins when you stop asking for permission. In the age of comfort and convenience, Nietzsche's words strike like thunder. To live is to suffer. To survive is to find some meaning in the suffering. He believed that suffering is not a flaw in existence. It is a crucible. It is how strength, genius, and character are forged. He rejected philosophies that promised escape from pain, like Schopenhauer's pessimism or Christian asceticism. Instead, he embraced pain as a sacred fire, a necessary ordeal that tempers the soul. Nietzsche's life was full of pain, yet through it, he produced some of the most powerful writing in philosophical history. He used his agony to go deeper, to mine truths others were afraid to face. He wanted us not to resent our wounds, but to use them as fuel. The most powerful people, Nietzsche said, are those who can take their suffering and turn it into art, wisdom, or power. He called this transformation sublimation, turning base emotions into higher achievements. He was not romanticizing suffering. He was telling us to own it, to integrate it, to grow because of it. And that's why he urged us to embrace amor fati, the love of fate. Not just acceptance, but love for everything that happens, even the difficult, even the tragic, because through it, we become who we are. Nietzsche's mind was volcanic, and his ideas were numerous and explosive. One of his most famous is the provocative statement, "God is dead, and we have killed him." This wasn't a celebration of atheism. It was a warning. Nietzsche saw that as religion lost its power in the modern world, people would be left without a foundation. No absolute truth, no divine moral compass. What would replace it? Science? Nationalism? Nihilism? He foresaw a spiritual crisis, where people lacking meaning would descend into despair or blind conformity. That's why he said the task of the future is to create meaning, not inherit it. Then there's the haunting idea of eternal recurrence, the thought experiment that asks, what if you had to live this exact life? Every moment, every joy, every failure, again and again, forever. Would you scream in dread or rejoice in affirmation? Nietzsche used this concept as a test. Are you living a life worth repeating? It's a terrifying but powerful tool to examine the choices we make, the regrets we carry, and the courage we need. Finally, Nietzsche's critique of morality still shakes the world today. He argued that traditional morality often serves the interests of the weak, turning humility, obedience, and guilt into virtues, while demonizing strength, pride, and ambition. He called for a reevaluation of values, where we stop blindly following inherited codes and start creating ethical frameworks that honor growth, vitality, and truth. Nietzsche's legacy is not a system of beliefs. It's a call to arms, a call to become strong, not by domination, but by self-mastery. To stop asking what is good for society and instead ask, what is good for me to become who I truly am? He doesn't promise peace. He promises transformation. He doesn't offer certainty. He offers freedom. And he doesn't ask you to follow him. He dares you to surpass him. So when life gets hard, when you feel lost, broken, tired, remember Nietzsche. Not as a cold philosopher, but as a wounded warrior, whispering from the edge. You were not made to be safe. You were made to become. Now rise. Because in the end, life is not a puzzle to solve. It's a mountain to climb. And Nietzsche's message is simple. Climb it. Bleed if you must, but climb. Not to prove something to the world, but to become someone the world cannot ignore. Ask yourself today, where am I holding back my will to power? Where have I traded courage for comfort? And what would my life look like if I faced suffering not with fear, but with fire? Remember, you are not just here to exist. You are here to become. And as Nietzsche said, no price is too high to pay for the privilege of owning yourself.